Welcome. This is a lecture on supernatural elements in the play Macbeth by William Shakespeare. Let me warn you ahead of time, this is a review lecture. You should have finished reading the play by the time you see it, or it won't make that much sense. Now, the first thing we have to mention is that Shakespeare included elements of the supernatural in the play Macbeth, partly to please his king, James I, who really believed in witches so much that he wrote a book called Demonology about witches, and he even blamed witchcraft for the sinking of a ship which killed his fiancée, who was coming over from mainland Europe. The people in the audience actually believed very much into the things. They believed in the things that appear in this play. For example, the witches and their power. That would be the first element of the supernatural. They were believed to have powers such as telling the future, being able to sail as an animal without a tail. They did all kinds of things that everybody believed in, and that's why people were afraid of witches in those days. And you have rather scary witches in this play. They were called the Weird Sisters, which was really spelled W-Y-R-D, and meant that they controlled the fates, not that they were unusual, although they really were unusual. After all, they had little beards, for example. The second element of the supernatural, I guess, would be Hecate, or Hecate. She's the queen of witches, and she has the power, for example, of flying to the moon and getting a magic vapor, which she does in the play. A third element of the supernatural, not in any particular order, would be the ghost of Banquo. They really did believe in ghosts. They were scared. And the ghost of Banquo, serves the purpose of providing a turning point in the play and exposing Macbeth for the killer that he is. But the ghost is scary looking, 20 mortal wounds on his head, and really nobody can see this ghost except Macbeth, which makes some people think it was kind of a psychological thing. But in Shakespeare's time, since they really believed in ghosts, I have to believe that he was meant to be a ghost. Another unusual and supernatural element to the play is all the weird things that happen, and this time it's W-E-I-R-D, with nature after the king has been killed. For example, in Act 1, Scene 3, Lennox talks about the winds being so wild that they blew down the chimneys. At night, a bird, which is the owl, the obscure owl, the owl of night, which normally doesn't make that much noise, an occasional who, was clamoring all night. It would not shut up. That was unusual as far as nature is concerned. A little later in the next scene, Act 1, Scene 4, Ross talks about the dark night, the traveling lamp strangling the dark night, which is another metaphoric way of saying that there was an eclipse, but I guess they didn't use that word in those days. In any event, this is considered unusual because how many times did they see eclipses, and how advanced was their science? Their science was not very advanced at all. Okay? Later on in the same scene, the old man talks about having heard that a falcon killed a mousing owl. What's unusual about that is the falcon is normally the hunter, the predator. The owl is normally the prey, and here the tables are reversed. And then Ross mentions that Duncan's horses, and he's an eyewitness to this, he claims, began to eat each other. And again, normally that's weird, in addition to which the horses are considered the best of their breed. After all, Duncan was a king, he could afford the best. A fifth element of the supernatural would be the imaginary dagger that Macbeth sees as he's walking up the stairs on his way to killing the king. He sees the dagger kind of like leading him onward, and then a little later, the dagger is full of blood, which indicates that the first dagger was before he committed the murder. The second one that he imagines or thinks he sees, or maybe does actually see, since we're talking supernatural here, is filled with the blood of the king after the king's been killed. Number 6 would be predictions. And again, those show powers, the powers to tell the future, the powers that the witches have. One of the powers that the witches have. There are predictions in the play, and I'm sure you know what they are. I don't have to list them here. Element number 7, the apparitions. okay, that come out of the boiling cauldron or the big boiling pot. The armed head wearing a helmet. The bloody child. The young boy wearing a crown and holding a little tree. We know what they stand for. If you don't, again, ask your teacher, go over it, review it. But apparitions are certainly supernatural elements. They were not like ghosts. They were partial images of things. And finally, the last element that I'd like to mention, in those days, and we're talking early 1600s, very early 1600s, the number 3 was considered a magic number. And therefore, the play is populated with mentionings of 3. For example, there are 3 witches. They dance around the pot at one point 3 times this way, 3 times that way, 3 times this way, 3 times 3. There are 3 predictions early in the play. There are 3 more predictions later in the play. There are 3 murderers when the professional murderer joins the original 2, and there are 3 apparitions. So all in all, there are plenty of elements of the supernatural in this play, and if you're given an essay question on that, at least you'll be well prepared to write a really good answer.